Welcome, welcome everyone. We here at NRCDV are so pleased to have you all. Please turn your attention to our interpretation team.
Bienvenidos. Voy a dar este mensaje en español y después en inglés. Welcome. I'll be saying this message in Spanish and then in English. Hola, mi nombre es Abraham y junto con Irving estaremos interpretando del inglés al español durante la sesión de hoy. El crear espacios multilingües no es responsabilidad de los intérpretes, sino de todas las personas presentes. Por eso, les pedimos que hablen a un ritmo moderado, voz alta y claramente, prácticamente que respiren al hablar. También va a haber interpretación del lenguaje a señas americano. Por favor, si tienen alguna dificultad, no surfan en silencio, déjenos saber a través de la caja chat. También, una vez que vayan o vengan de los pequeños grupitos, van a poder seleccionar su lenguaje nuevamente. Y así es como lo seleccionan. Al pie de su pantalla van a ver un globito. Si están aquí con una computadora, si están aquí con su celular, van a ver 3 puntitos al pie de su pantalla a mano derecha. Seleccione el globo terráqueo o los 3 puntitos, seleccione su idioma español y asegúrese de seleccionar finalizado. Gracias. Ahora voy a decir este mensaje en inglés. Hi, my name is Abraham, and along with Erwin, we'll be interpreting from English to Spanish during today's sessions. There is also ALS interpretation as well. Creating multilingual space is not only the responsibility of interpreters, but of everyone here, which is why we ask to please speak at a moderate pace, loudly, and clearly. Just remember to breathe when you speak. And if you have any technical difficulties, let us know through the chat. Zoom has been enabled with interpretation. And please remember, if you do decide to go into a breakout room, you'll be using the following steps to select your language. So if you're here with a computer, you'll see a globe at the bottom of your screen. If you're here with your phone, you'll see 3 dots at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Select the 3 dots or the globe. You'll see your language. You can select English and make sure to hit done. Please speak in the language that you've selected if you're bilingual. And thank you very much. I'll pass it back to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much for giving us those instructions. And for myself, as a New Yorker primarily, I will remember to speak slowly. The loud part I can do with no problem. So as we begin to get into these awesome sessions we have for you today at this event, I would first like to introduce myself. And as I introduce myself, right after that, we will go into some housekeeping, okay? So with that, I am LaVon Morris Grant, the Director of Community Engagement here at the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence. And I've been with the organization for almost 2 years, but I've been in the work of gender-based violence for almost 30. So I am well versed in these various ways in which we try to bring healing and centering the voices of survivors. So with that, please, let's look at some of the housekeeping that we have. And one of the things we will like to review for you, and you can see and follow along with me on the screen, is we are recording the event, right? You can share it through our website. The event will be shared through our website. We are offering a live caption feature for all of our events. You can access this feature by clicking on caption at the bottom of your screen. The Q&A feature provides an opportunity for attendees to enter questions for the presenters to respond. Remember, the public chat is open and visible to everyone. Please reach out to our staff if you are experiencing ongoing technical issues, but please note our limited capacity to address issues while the running of this meeting. So please be patient with us as we all work together to make this event successful. Before we turn the floor to our presenters, we would like to make all participants aware of our wellness room. NRCDV has created a breakout room that will be available to you throughout the event, and that's for today and tomorrow. Because presenters will be discussing experiences of racial trauma, this is meant to be a place of respite. For those of you who may need to step away, please take that if you really, really need that. A care bear will be present in this space, sharing videos or music meant to soothe and heal. They are available to talk if that is requested. You can access this space at any time by clicking on the breakout room icon at the bottom of your screen. When the wellness room box pops up, hover over the number in the upper right-hand corner, and the word join should appear. Click that to join the wellness room. Be aware that other participants can see who has visited the room. If you would like to anonymously step away, you can physically leave or close out the Zoom and rejoin at any point. Please remember to take care of yourself. So this is very important, right? Those of us who've done this work for so long and those who are new, please take heed to using the breakout rooms as often as you need to. There's no judgment against that. We all have to figure out our own self-care. So thank you for that. Now, why are we here? Why are we here? This National Prevention Town Hall uplifts innovative prevention approaches in the Northeast region that build solidarity across movements to disrupt systems of violence that disproportionately harm Black women, and gender expansive individuals. Over 2 days, we will explore ways to support Black survivors as leaders in our movement and build meaningful partnerships with Black-led movements and organizations. Our presenters will lead conversations around critical issues impacting Black women, youth, and gender expansive individuals, including reproductive justice and housing as a basic need and right. Now, to hopefully to center us all and ground us all, I will also ask that you join me in welcoming the National Resource Center's Domestic Violence Vice President of Programs, Prevention, and Social Change, my good friend and VP, Yvonne Ortiz.
Thank you so much, Lavon. Hello, everyone. On behalf of the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence, I want to officially welcome you to our Northeast Region National Prevention Town Hall. First, we gratefully acknowledge the Native peoples on whose ancestral homelands we gather today, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their home on the region we occupy today. Myself, I'm joining from the land of the Timacuans. We would like to honor all the ancestral stewards of the Northeast region and their descendants, living in over 1,000 tribes, nations, bands, pueblos, communities, or native villages. We would also like to acknowledge the underrepresentation of Indigenous voices in the prevention scene. It is our intention to continue to build relationships that allow us to better address this gap through our work. Thank you. And for the next 2 days, I'm really excited. We will embark in rich and stimulating conversations around the importance of building solidarity across movements. I would like to share what a fellow Puerto Riqueña, Aurora Levins Morales, said about what solidarity is. I say solidarity is knowing the future is long and wide, with room for everyone on earth to enter. I say it's taking the long view of the job, helping you onto the wall so that you can reach down and pull me up, lifting you into the tree so you can shake down peaches for the two of us. That solidarity is a two-way street, fires burning at both ends, and the only well in the middle. Solidarity is rooted in willingness and openness to learn and exchange with others, acknowledging that our struggles are interconnected, while embracing the importance of autonomy, self-determination, and agency in achieving liberation. In practicing solidarity, we acknowledge that our liberation is intimately bound up with that of others. Today, we come together in solidarity from different movements, different paths, but with one goal: to address the root causes that support the conditions for violence and oppression to flourish in the lives of those most marginalized in our communities. We come together as one voice, una voz. And I want to thank you for attending and our amazing planning committee. We have Alana Brown representing the Safe Sisters Circle in Washington, D.C. Ayana Wallace from Ujima, the National Center on Violence Against Women in the Black Community. Dr. Jean Clarke-Mitchell from Massachusetts WOCN in Boston. Lucy Rios from Rhode Island Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Monet Johnson from Girls for Gender Equity in New York. We also want to thank a live graphic illustration for each session by Andrew Medina of the On the Right Mind, a women of color-owned small business that provides graphic recording and strategic illustration to organizations and movements working towards social change and creating a world where we all thrive. I would also like to thank our amazing NRCV staff who has poured their hearts and souls, oh my God, to bring you an amazing event. I hope it fills your heart. I hope that we continue our journey in solidarity and have a great time, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. Onward.
That's right, Yvonne. All onward. Thank you so much. And those of us who have helped plan this great event, we are excited, somewhat nervous a little bit, in the hopes that you all get out of it what we have truly poured our hearts into to bring to you. So please bear with us, give us grace, right? And we can do this onward and upward as we go here at NRCDV and with the rest of you who have joined us. So in continuing into this event, now we are pleased to pass the floor to your town hall, our town hall weaver, Monet Johnson. Monet is a cultural worker, community organizer, abortion doula, and reproductive justice practitioner. So Monet, I welcome you once again. Good to see you, and you have it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lavon. You're amazing. Thank you to the planners of this event. I'm Monet, like they already said. And before I begin, I kind of want to ground us in one of my favorite quotes from Toni K. Bambara, where she posed the question, what are we pretending not to know today, right? What are we pretending not to know today? When I think about this really wonderful question and what it invites in my body, I think about all the ways in which the world has to pretend like it doesn't know what violence is, pretend like it doesn't know what patriarchy is, pretend like it doesn't know what misogynoir is, or any other ism that impacts Black women, Black girls, and gender nonconforming folks and people. I think about what it means for the people on this call who hold some type of experience with violence or hold a role working against forms of violence, and how we're never afforded the ability to act like we don't know what those things are. I think about the fact that in this world, there's a small select few of us who have made it our mission to acknowledge these violences, to acknowledge the people impacted by it, and to also acknowledge our own personal experiences. And we give them meaning and language, and we fight for resources to help mitigate those violences. So I think if you showed up to this call today, if you're a speaker today, you are someone who is probably asking yourself the question, what are we pretending not to know today? And your work is giving that question its answer. And so I'm really grateful for all those people. When I think about what it means to be on a call like this, it makes me return back to the 13-year-old girl who was in the 9th grade, and I came home to go to my little sister's recital, and all I needed to do was change my clothes. And that one day, changed the entire trajectory of my life. And my mother and I became home invasion survivors and were held at gunpoint in the middle of the day, right? In the safest place in the world for me, which was my home. I had to ask myself, am I gonna make it out of here? Are these people gonna do something to me? Is my mother gonna make it out of here? Is this the day that I live without my mom, right? In the 2 longest hours of my life. It only took 2 hours for someone to change my life for the next decade. And that to me is why I'm here today. I really think about everything that folks on this call are probably holding and everything that happens currently right now. If you are someone that's on social media, you may have seen the story of the young Black woman who refused to give a man her number, and it landed her in the hospital. She was hit in the face with a brick. And I think about like what happens when you exercise your right to say no as a dark-skinned Black woman, and the fact that that could actually end your life. And so there are so many people in this world who pretend like they don't know that that is a fundamental fact of this world. When I think about what it means to be an abortion doula right now, and the relationship between reproductive justice and survivorship, I think about the consequences that violence has on our autonomy, on our family making, and all other things. That's what I'm sitting with today. I really want to take some time to ground us in one of my favorite poems by June Jordan. And I'm not going to read the full poem. It's called A Poem About My Rights, where she says, I am the history of rape. I am the history of the rejection of who I am. I am the history of terrorized incarceration of myself. I am the history of battery assault and limitless armies against whatever I want to do with my mind and my body and my soul. And whether it's about walking out at night, whether it's about the love that I feel, or whether it's about the sanctity of my vagina, or the sanctity of my national boundaries, or the sanctity of my leaders, or the sanctity of each and every desire that I know from my personal and indisputable single and singular heart. I have been raped because I have been wrong, the wrong sex, the wrong age, the wrong skin, the wrong nose, the wrong hair, the wrong need, the wrong dream, the wrong geographic, the wrong everything. I have been the meaning of rape. I have been the problem everyone seeks to eliminate by forced penetration with or without the evidence. And let this be be unmistakable. This poem is not consent. I do not consent. I do not consent. I am not wrong. Wrong is not my name. My name is my own, my own, my own. And I can't tell you who the hell set things up like this, but I can tell you now that my resistance, my simple and daily and nightly self-determination may very well cost you your life. I wanted to ground us in that poem because as a Black feminist, mine is one as dissent, it's resistance, it's love, it's survivor support, and it's many things. And so when I think about that day as a 13-year-old girl and the many other moments of violence that I've experienced and how they changed the trajectory of my life, I think about June Jordan, Alice Walker, Toni Cade Bambora, and Bell Hooks, and how their work and their refusal to leave Black girls like me hanging helped get me back on course, helped save me, and help me become who I am today. And so I'm so happy that one of our first sections is actually dedicated to supporting Black survivors, because it's the work that folks on that panel do. That's what kept me alive after my experiences. And I am very, very, very happy to turn it back over to you, Lavon. Thank you all.
Wow, Monet. Wow, wow, wow. Thank you for grounding us in such an awesome welcome and introduction into who you are, and also into who we are as Black women navigating in this white spaces, or these white spaces where people pretend we don't exist, or pretend that what we are dealing with does not exist. So thank you so much for bringing us right there in this space as we transition into our panel discussion on supporting Black survivors as leaders in our movement. So with that transition, we are opening up our panel discussion, moderated by Ayana Wallace Vex. She is Training and Technical Assistant Manager with Ujima, the National Center on Violence Against Women in the Black Community. And Ayana, I invite you please to pronounce your name for all of us, including me. And I apologize because I know I did not do your last name justice. It is spelled so beautiful, and I did not know how to put the syllables or letters together. So
it's no problem.
I want to be transparent in that.
Yeah, it's no problem.
I invite you, please, to allow us to learn your name, because you don't need to learn it. We need to learn and pronounce it correctly. So thank you, Ayana.
So you are all good, Lavon. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our conversation today. My name is Ayana Wallace View, and I am one of the training and TA managers with Ujima Inc., the National Center on Violence Against Women in the Black Community. Let me slow down, sorry. I get excited. I have the pleasure of helping us hold space for this conversation today, and am joined by some amazing advocate leaders in the work. I have the pleasure of quickly introducing our panel guests. But before I do, I'll just say I've been really excited for this conversation. So I'll quickly introduce our panel, and then we'll jump into our discussion questions. We first have Dr. Jean Clarke-Mitchell of Massachusetts WCON. We have Alana Brown of Safe Sister Circle, and Kay Coghill of Me Too International. And I'll have you all introduce yourselves more, and especially as we move through the conversation, to give folks some more of your background. But again, their full bios are available, so take a look at those. They do really amazing work. Today's conversation, we'll really be talking through all about building pathways, creating pathways, tangible actions to support change. What does it look like to navigate mainstream spaces as people of color, and especially as Black women? And then how are we advocating for thriving compensation, or what are our roles as co-conspirators? So a lot of different themes we'll be talking through. But again, we have some drafted discussion questions that'll help us frame out this conversation some more. And so any of the panel guests, did you want to add anything before I jump in? I know our first question sort of gets us to who you are, but anything you wanted to just quickly start with? In 1 second, I'm gonna put my dog out of the room because she's having the zoomies right now. Alrighty, so if we are ready, let's go ahead and jump into our discussion. So first question, and anyone feel free to jump in who wants to start. How did you get into this work, really about anti-violence work? And what types of experiences have you had or spoken to other Black women in the field about their pathways in this work and what it's looked like for you all?
I can go. So I got into anti-violence work just as someone who was just interested in providing respite for other Black women, girls, and gender expansive folks who experience violence, because I'm a survivor of child sexual assault. And because of that, it made me want to seek out organizations to work for that would allow me to provide resources, to provide care, to provide options for healing and activations. And I saw Me Too was hiring for a digital director, and I knew in that moment that this would be a great opportunity for me to bring my own personal survivorship, but also the survivorship that I had come into contact with from other Black survivors into the workplace and actually do work that I was passionate about. And a lot of the experiences that I've had a child sexual abuse survivor has been a lot of gaslighting, being put in positions where I had to be around my abuser because they're a family member, and just the act of folks not taking my abuse seriously because I was a child. So it really informs my work as not only a survivor, but as a Black non-binary femme, to make sure that other children and other Black folks that look like me have people that believe them and are doing the work to make sure they have the resources and the healing that they need.
Thank you so much, Kay, for sharing and for getting us started. Dr. Jean or Alana?
I can go. Thank you so much. I am excited to be here. Oh my God, a little nervous, but I think it's all going to go well. I started into this movement by fleeing my home as an intimate partner violence survivor to a battered women's shelter in Western Mass, the Elizabeth Freeman Center. And while in the shelter, I had 2 degrees in business before I went to the shelter. And I got there and I saw all these women of different colors and backgrounds just helping each other. And I'm like, I want to do this. So I think this is great because they helped me and my children. So I just started by doing the hotline training and spending time there for 25 years. I just never left. And then while there, I discovered Mass Women of Color Network, which was started in 2010 by 7 women of color, and begin this work to help advocates. So we had a network of advocates, people who are working with sexual assault and domestic violence in Massachusetts. The work became important to me because not only a survivor of domestic violence, but also my children who witnessed that violence. And also myself who have experienced sexual assault, workplace violence, when my executive director says certain things to me, people using the N-word. I also experienced having refused promotions and raises, and also just inter-Black violence as well from other Black women or people of color who just don't understand me because I'm West Indian. And it's so complicated, but I am passionate about the work and I just keep doing it because I feel like I can bring a voice, I can make a difference. So I'm here. Thank you so much.
Oh, I guess. Hello, I can't hear anyone.
We can hear you.
Okay. Sorry. As I said, my name is Alana, and how I got involved in gender-based violence, particularly with Black women, it's kind of a long story. As I grew up, I myself am not a survivor. I want to be clear about that. And I knew survivors growing up, friends, parents, friends in general. But I knew I wanted to go to law school. I'm a lawyer by trade. And I knew I wanted to help Black women. I wanted to help my people, basically. I wasn't specifically about Black women or Black men. I was just like, I want to help my people. I see a lot of suffering within my community. I want to make it better. Then I guess I got older and I was an African studies major and I focused more on Black women rights. I knew I wanted to focus on, Black women and gender-based violence. So my very first career out of law school was unfortunately a prosecution office in Manhattan, New York. And there I worked with special victims unit with sexual assault, domestic violence survivors, and child sexual abuse survivors, and human trafficking survivors. And I'm not a fan of carceral work or carceral system, which is why I left the office. But what I did observe, what I did get to know is get to learn working with people with trauma, and just learn survivors, and also get to know how the system treated Black women. And we had a lot of Latina women who were survivors, and how they didn't treat them right, how they didn't believe them, how they disrespected them, how they didn't get connections with them, and how I always worked better with them than my white colleagues. And so when I left the office, I started to go into direct services. And I kind of saw the same thing in other direct services where it was white women-owned nonprofits and run nonprofits where there are no people of color, executive directors, no people of color, attorneys in these organizations. And so I wanted to start, and I founded my organization, Safe Sister Circle, because I wanted to start an organization that focused on Black women survivors and giving them culture responsive services that really focused on Black women survivors as themselves, that really focused on, giving services by other Black women attorneys, and that really focus on their experience as Black women, but also my experience as Black women and our attorneys' experience as Black women, and actually listening to our clients and actually respecting them and hearing what they had to say to provide them services, and understanding what they're going through the systems, and understanding how the court is going to look at them and how the court's going to interpret them, and how can we help them through that system interpretation, and how can we also relate to what they're trying to say to the court, to them. It's multifaceted, and I won't get started in the courts, but that's one of the big services that we do. And so that's kind of how I got involved in gender-based violence, was through a legal lens. And then I kind of went through direct services, and then kind of went through my own organization.
Thank you so much. And apologies, I cut out for a second, but the wonderful thing about working with other advocates is you just pick up and go when needed. And so can you talk to us about why it's important to center Black women survivors in the work and in mainstream spaces especially?
I would say because as a society, we ignore Black women. And as a society, in terms of voraciousness, which is a legal word for saying not listen to or not believe Black women. And we're often pushed to the side, or when they have stories, it's not important. You don't hear it on the news. You don't hear about it in the neighborhood, or people just think, oh, if this has happened to a Black woman, who cares? So I think there needs to be people there that says, we care. There's a group of people who care, and we want to help you. And we want to get together, collective people to help you, and then bring your story to the forefront and say that it's important and that you're important. And what you have to say, we believe you, and we want to represent you, and we want to help you heal and get, legal stuff if you want, but also, not just survive, but thrive.
Thank you. Dr. Jean or Kay?
Yes, I can go next. I agree with many of those, but I think, again, we Black women are at disadvantage just as much as Indigenous women. We tend to be the most in society, both socially and when it comes to public policy, we get ignored. And so I think it's important for us to be committed, or get others to help us to be committed to the work. That often they think they're not enough, that we don't understand that we have skill sets and we have a voice and we have value. So that that has been problematic in our society. Yeah.
And I would say that it's important to center Black women survivors in the work is because dating back to enslavement, Black women were seen as modes of production and consumed in ways that did not allow us to have any autonomy, not only over our bodies, but the way that we wanted to speak about things or just have opinions about things. And I think that in order to make sure that Black women and femmes and gender expansive folks are included in the work, it's important that we amplify their voices and make these spaces safe enough for them to feel comfortable to speak up, especially when we come from a lineage of being told that we cannot speak up, and that if you do speak up, you may end up in harm's way. So I think that it's just really important for us to create those safe spaces in order for Black women to feel like they have the opportunity to share their voices as survivors.
Absolutely. And there are some good comments starting to come through in the chat. So folks, feel free again to keep adding to the conversation your thoughts as our presenters share as well. Some of you spoke to it to certain points already, but can you all talk to us more about some of the stigmas that continue to impact Black women leaders in the work, and especially Black survivors that are in the work?
Yeah, I can.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, Dr. Jean.
Thank you. Oftentimes, we're considered not as intelligent. We're considered not as committed. It is held against us as, especially women, that we should be more servers than leaders, but leaders are servers as well. And so that there's a lot of the stigma that we often just, we're not qualified to get the work done.
And to kind of build off of what Dr. Clarke-Mitchell said, we're often seen as the help in the workplace. So for us, when we get into the workplace, even if we have the skill sets and the degrees or whatever we may need to do the job, we will still find ourselves doing the work of other folks because they look at us as the help. And I also think that there is just a lack of conversations around the realities of being a Black leader, especially in the survivor justice space, because a lot of people think that these movements are ran by white women. So when they do see a Black leader in the space, they are questioning her. They are trying to decide whether or not this person can speak to these experiences. And if they can, are they actually going to do the work that we think is needed? And I also think that Black women in leadership, we have a very unique way of getting the work done because a lot of our work is rooted in Black feminism. So we have a very communal way of doing the work. And I think that a lot of folks who are not Black women in leadership do not think of things as community-based, but Black women leaders do.
I really can't add on to more than what Dr. Clarke-Mitchell said and Kay said, other than I really believe in the idea that we can't do it, and the idea that society and other leaders and the domestic violence, sexual assault field, you feel like you know, will tell you can't do this. Or when I started my organization, a lot of them told me just straight up, you can't do this, you don't have the capacity to do this, you don't have the skills to do this. And I just ignored them and said, you know, whatever. But I think it's just like, how dare you think that I'm not intelligent enough, or how dare you think that I'm not capable enough? Who are you to judge me? But I do think there's the idea that of, you know, you're okay to work fellowships, you're okay to do internships, you're okay to do this and that, but you're not okay to be the senior attorney, you're not okay to be the managing attorney or the ED, but you're okay just to be the lower rings of like the work. And I think that's true, very much so. And so we have to like either go into an organization that's either run by Black women leaders, or go to organizations that Black women leaders have positions of power within it. Even that's for all women of color, not just Black women, but other different women of color as well, that face the same things as me, that I've seen with Latinas as well. So I think by the end, like most people, with everyone else said, kind of hit it on the nose.
Yeah, and just quickly from when all three of you were speaking, the thing I was thinking about is how our trauma is used against us to hold us back. So like with not being seen as capable with not being seen as intelligent enough or as, you know, a leader. There's also, you know, are they over their trauma enough to be a leader? When, I mean, that's a continuum, right? Like that means so many different things to different people of, are you over it? And like, why should we have survivors be over what they experience when they are navigating it, right? Like at their own pace. So that's just what came up for me. So thank you all so much. In what ways does anti-Blackness show up when working with Black leaders, or how have you all seen it play out in your experience in the field?
One thing that really has shown up, and I'm speaking about intracommunal, so that means Black people working with Black people, is respectability politics playing a role in what a Black woman leader should be like. So there's this idea of what she should dress like, what she should sound like, how she should carry herself, right? And if you are not fitting into the mold of those things, then you cannot be a leader. And that's extremely anti-Black, because being Black is not a monolith, right? And I think that really alters the way that people treat, especially Black women in leadership who may not look or fit the bill of what they think a leader is supposed to look like. And respectability politics make it hard for Black women leaders to be seen as leaders, right? Because if you have a lot of tattoos, or if you speak in AAVE in the workplace or the boardroom, or if you wear sneakers instead of wearing heels when you go to meetings, people are automatically judging you. And it may be white people, but it may also be people in your own community, because they have this notion of what a leader is supposed to look like. So I think that's how I've seen it show up since I've been in the field in general. And just I'm also a professor as well. So like I see that in academia a lot, where when I walk into the classroom, if there's another educator in the classroom, they're looking at me like, she has on a t-shirt, jeans, and sneakers. Like, what does she know? How can she be a professor or whatever? So I think that respectability politics play a big role in the anti-Blackness that we face.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yes, I agree with all of that, with the respectability politics. And you know, the other thing is our crown. It gets held against us in many ways. How do you wear your hair? And as you said, how do you dress, and what you're supposed to look like, the schema in our heads too, as Black people. There's in certain populations, if you don't look a certain way, you can't get that respectability. You haven't earned it. Assimilation to what, even among ourselves, what the dominant culture has expectations of us. And so in some way, we have also done that to ourselves, to think that, I don't think she should be the supervisor, or I wouldn't recommend her for that job, or something about other than her skill set is being used against her in many ways. So we have to figure out how to build trust among us, you know, and that sense of accountability to help each other. So yeah, that's what I see. Just as, you know, another example of like being in spaces where I'm also a professor and I'm a psychotherapist. And I remember going to pick up in a space, I live in a community that's predominantly white. And I pick up this client, and after a while working with her, she said to me, you know, when I first saw you came to pick me up in the reception, I thought, why did they have to give me the Black one? You know, I'm not used to seeing a Black therapist where I am. So you can't be good enough, right? That respectability. So thank you.
And Alana, if you wanted to add, I had a thought quickly too, when Dr. Jean was speaking about how oftentimes when Black women aren't promoted or aren't seen as leaders, it's often just thrown away as like a communication or like a language issue. And so the case point as well of like actual language is used against us, but then the ways in which we communicate and are in relationship with each other is often used against us because it's not fully understood. So that's just what came up. But Alana, go ahead.
I would, I guess, jump on what you said. And it's interesting you brought up language, because language is really how we relate to our clients. And that we're really, you know, I'm originally from the DC area. Everyone in my staff is not. but we understand, colloquial things that they say or things in the neighborhood. We are centered. My office is in Ward 8, which is where we focus on, and using language that makes people feel comfortable, using language that's not too legal, using language that is, based on just everyday words and just based on everything. So we could just come together as a collective and just learn, how we want these cases to be without stigmatizing anyone, without being pretentious, without, for them we can feel like, oh, you're just like the white lawyers that we have. Our church people always say, you guys heard us and you guys know how to speak to us, and you guys actually we get like, oh my God, I was so happy I got a sister as a lawyer. So we kind of get the opposite. Like people were happy when they see a Black woman attorney with us. That same way I'd be happy to see a Black therapist, because that's who I would want to see as my therapist personally. But so, I also would share, which I could say like there's colorism with the Black community, particularly in leadership. I could say that as a fair-skinned woman, I know I've had it easier than other people in Black leadership. I think people will look to me easier as a leader than because of my closeness to whiteness than they do people who are darker skinned. And that's what I observe. People who have natural hair. And I mean, I can wear natural hair, but I don't. Or people who come wearing tattoos and stuff. I don't have tattoos, but they're harshly judged by society and by other Black people who feel like they're professionals and things like that. And I think that's a problem. That we just stop using these constructs of white society to say oh, you're a good lawyer, or you're a good doctor, you get this because you have tattoos, or you have blue hair, or you have this or that, or because you're dark skinned, you must not somehow be less educated than someone else. So that's what I've kind of seen. But we've gotten along with a lot of our clients, more of a positive experience from having Black attorneys, I would say. But DC is also a very Black area. I should say the difference is it's a very Black, and where we work is a very Black area as well.
Thank you all so much. And so we started already moving into this next question, but what then does it mean to be in solidarity with Black women and Black femmes? What does it look like for us? What do we need?
I think we need trust. I think the hardest part of starting an organization and kind of being placed in certain communities is building trust. Not just as an attorney, but we also starting a mental health program, but just in general as an organization, and really doing community events that aren't related to legal stuff, but it's more related to community events like dinners and back to school events and different things like that. So people can get to know you. So we're you're not from here. I don't know you. Why should I trust you with any of my problems? Why should I share my difficulties and the harm that's going to get thrown against me with you? And I'm sorry, I talk fast. Let me slow down. And I think the building trust is really important, and it's hard work and it takes some time. I think we've been open for 5 years. I think it took us about 2.5 years, 3 years to really have people trust us. And we've been around for quite some time, but I think that's important.
That's a huge one, and people really underestimate how far it goes in building a relationship. I always tell people that there's a very big difference between trust and rapport. I might have a great rapport with you and I like you as a person, but that does not mean I trust you with my life, right? Or trust you with helping me make decisions for myself. Dr. Jean?
Yeah, I'm thinking about the system oppresses us all. So it's in our best interest for survival to have solidarity. But again, it's affected by so many things. So I'm thinking that, we're all on the margins when it comes to how the dominant culture or mainstream sees us. So it's in our best interest, but because of the lack of trust, because of so many variables that impacts that, you don't understand me because this, or you don't understand me because that. And so we need to spend time really kind of getting better, at understanding each other and accepting each other. It's important for us to have solidarity because it's also the mainstream work against us. We are typically oral people. We don't always write as well, or we don't always articulate in the way they want. So when you're at a conference or you're someplace and you can have others that look like you, join together, figure a way how to introduce yourself and talk to each other so that, you know, you build that kind of, I'm not alone. We need a solidarity to not feel like we're alone. And also, acceptance, I might have said that before, but acceptance, we don't have to clearly understand before accept. And I know it's hard to just trust someone, but to be open and be able to say, I'm in this environment, because this is typically what happens to me where I am. I don't see a lot of people that look like me, even the advocates and people that, you know, we help. So I just think being in solidarity for us, for femmes, we're dying, femmes are dying, Black women are dying at many of the higher rates disproportionately than other women, of other females in the domestic violence and sexual assault movement. So yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, I think that is important for us to be truly inclusive. I identify as a non-binary femme, and what I've noticed a lot in the movement spaces is that it is very hard for folks to really accept gender expansive folks and Black femmes, to truly accept Black femmes for who they are and how they show up in the world. And I feel like if we really want to be in solidarity with other Black folk like ourselves, we have to be inclusive of all Black folks, regardless of their gender identity. And we need to make priorities to make sure that we are addressing them by the proper name that they want to be addressed by, addressing them by the proper pronouns, and not giving them pushback when they do decide to be vulnerable and let us know that personal information about them that they may not have told other people. So I think that's one thing that is really important. And I think that inclusivity will make solidarity that much stronger, because you can say that you are in community with someone and you can tolerate that they are X, Y, and Z, but it's not about tolerating, it's about radical acceptance, right? Like, do you radically accept this person in your community for who they are, the good, the bad, the ugly? Like, do you radically accept them, and are you willing to do the work, whether that be through transformative and restorative justice? If they're doing things to harm the community, are you willing to do the work to work with them, to bring them to the side where they are no longer harming folks, right? So I think that radical acceptance and inclusivity are important for solidarity.
Thank you so much. I'm going to be saying that for the rest of the day, radical acceptance, because that just really speaks to the heart of what we need, like as Black women leaders, as Black femmes, right? Of like, we really need people to not only trust and believe us, to not only think that we're capable, but to radically accept how we come in our various forms and like see them as beautiful, and see them as worthy. So thank you so much. So talking about these pathways and talking about how do we build folks up, right? How do we start to create better, more helpful, more sustainable pathways for Black leaders?
For me, I talked about being intentional with our supports. And what do those supports look like? Encourage people around career development, helping them to build connections. A lot of times people are in community, but they don't feel connected even within their own communities. As we talk about acceptance and radical acceptance, it's a journey, you know, because sometimes we just think, I don't know. But if our hearts are open to it and we encourage people to connect, stay connected, even when it takes courage sometimes to reach out, but try it anyway. You hear about somebody who's amazing, try to connect with them, try to, you know, encourage others to connect with them as well. Encourage training towards leadership is important. I think many of us, again, as I said before, we have skill sets that we don't even recognize. But when you see it in your sister, or, you know, that you can say, you know, I noticed this about you, and encourage that person, because a lot of spaces that we're in, there's a lot of low self-esteem going on. There's a lot of sadness. There's a lot of fear. But when you can, you know, say to someone, I think you should try that. You know, I really think that could be something that you could be really good at. That's important.
I think that it's really important for us to rethink what professional development looks like, right? And start to create avenues and options for folks that aren't the typical professional development, right? So professional development around storytelling, right? Narrative framing, like these types of things that allow you to bring pieces of yourself into the workplace. And I think that being able to bring pieces of yourself into these spaces as a leader, especially in the movement, will allow you to feel more grounded, but also will allow you to be able to bring along other people who may have similar stories and did not know that their stories or their ways of thinking could be brought into these spaces. And so I think that like really engaging in a new way of professional development that allows you to bring in pieces of yourself, that allows you to show up as your full self and allows you to be able to make mistakes, hold yourself accountable, and figure out what works and what doesn't work. And like Dr. Jean said, figuring out those skills that you have that you didn't know you had, right? You may be an amazing storyteller and you didn't even know it because that's not what your job calls for, but you go to a storytelling professional development that's centered around Black leaders. And now you realize I'm really good at telling the story about my organization. I'm really good at telling the story about the history of survivorship. So I think that that is something that could really be helpful to create pathways for Black leaders.
I would add on, I agree, because actually I will say that when I started my leadership track, I did not have like storytelling skills or narrative building skills. This is something I did have to learn through like alternative capacity building programs. So I think that's right. Like you are told like you should go through a certain leadership track, which might be good for some people, but for you and the community that you try to work with, you need these extra skills that help you relate to the community. But I also would say a mentor would be a great thing to have. I'm very lucky that I have a Black woman who's a sexual assault, who's an ED at a sexual assault organization in DC, who's my mentor. And she's great. And she can talk to her about anything. And I think if you could find a mentor, maybe they're not in your area, but maybe they're in your work field of work in different areas to really help you and to teach you like the game and teach you like what you can get away with, what you can't get away with as a Black woman, and to teach you, you know, what things are important to make sure that you're on point, because you know that if you're not on point, they're gonna come at people are gonna come after you. That's in any career as a Black woman in anything. I also really into sponsors, and that kind of is what I got from like the law firm world, but more so like someone who speaks about you when you're not in the room, like a Black woman who like advocates for you when you're not there. Like if you someone's like knows people in Congress and you need someone on the panel, they'll say, oh, Alana is a good person who talks about culture specific programs, and she could be on this congressional panel or things like that. So you want people to look out for you, to like speak about you, but you also really want people, a mentor you can trust. That's I would say a Black woman mentor in your field. That's who I would trust personally. And I think mentorship is just important in general.
Absolutely. And when you were talking about mentorship, I was thinking about some of the ways in which I had or had not been mentored in my own career in the field, and some of the other ways I've seen Black women either be mentored or not, and how wonderful leaders they could have been if they had been given the space and opportunity, right? And so I was thinking about if, for instance, we're talking about a mainstream program and you're a white leader or non-Black person of color leader, what does that look like in terms of building up Black leaders still? Right? Like, what do you really need to delve into? Is it culture? Is it language? Is it understanding, again, different styles of coaching? What does that look like? And how are we really fostering avenues for folks? And to Alana's point, if you are building up a Black leader and you're a leader yourself, like you have to have that Black woman's back. You have to have that Black femme's back, like regardless of anything. Like there should be such an innate trust and sense of responsibility for that person that you're gonna rock with them regardless. And so Black women need that, especially coming from non-Black people, leaders that are supposed to be building them up too. And so as we're continuing this conversation about crafting and creating spaces, what are some behaviors or patterns that might be oppressive to Black women that we should start making sure to avoid or writing out of our usual script or usual status quo?
hate to be the person to bring it up again, but respectability politics, it's harmful. Misogynoir, right? So the hatred of Black women because they're Black and women. So perpetuating these misogynistic ways of thinking and doing even subtle things, right? Saying certain things about the Black woman's hair in the workplace, like that's extremely violent and harmful. And I think that those two things, misogynoir and respectability politics, are two things that are extremely oppressive to Black women in the workplace, because we already experiencing that in our everyday life. And then we go into the workplace and we're experiencing it again. And then we get on the internet and we're experiencing it again. So there's no way to escape these types of standards that people are setting for you that are just not even unrealistic. They're just standards that should not be attached or attributed to a person at all.
I agree. And I just want to throw racism back into the picture, because a lot of times people, there's unconscious bias that people are just not attending to. And I think you mentioned earlier, Catalin, about them acting like they don't know, those behaviors that, when people use certain language in front of you and try to explain, well, I'm just saying that, or that's what the judge is going to want to hear, or whatever they do to use those words and try to get away with them. But it's just a lack of support for people that are not what they call educated, instead of having respect for your lived experience. We see that if you don't have certain degrees, then you can't get certain positions. That sort of stuff, like, oh, we can't give Nicole a job as a professor, but I saw just some woman from the dominant culture at my job just got a job as a professor. She doesn't have a doctorate, she doesn't have a PhD, but I thought it was impossible, for that to happen. So those kind of behaviors that you're not good enough, we don't think of you as responsible enough. The lack of support to help you, give you the kind of responsibility to help your leadership skills, so that the next time something comes up, we're not gonna put you in that. We don't trust that you're going to be able to come through, because you people, you're all about your family. So if your family or someone is sick, you're going to do that first before you come to work. Those sort of thinking those thinking patterns, behaviors have gotten in our way.
I really don't have anything to add. I think, like I said, everyone's saying the things that need to be said.
Yeah, I think you, of course, are spot on again. I think for me, what was coming up when you were speaking was about that real miscommunication of culture, and like why you need to bring culture in. Something that Kaylin, who's my co-manager on the team, will talk to you about, or I can tell you, is that my team sits in productive tension, but it actually has to be productive. We can disagree, we can have varying opinions, we all come from different lived experiences. Even though everyone on our team are Black women, we're not always going to agree, but there's a collective way in which we disagree with each other and we still hold space for each other. And that doesn't always happen in mainstream spaces. And so to think about what that would mean for building Black leaders up, of like, what does it mean to be called out and called back in your work? And how do you accept that as a non-Black person of color or a white leader? Like, what does that look like for you? And so just, again, thinking about behaviors that are consistently harmful to Black women, and are we really listening to Black women when we're telling you what we need, and when what we're telling you is harmful? How are we accepting that feedback or not? Are some good questions to ask ourselves as we continue. How can we, or do we, or should we foster better allyship across disciplines in the field?
By allyship, do you mean like us being allies, or how to work with people who identify as allies?
Let's go with both.
Okay, so for my response is kind of for both of us. So Dr. Bettina Love, who is a scholar, talks about this term that she uses called co-conspirator instead of allies. And a co-conspirator, based on what Dr. Bettina Love talks about, is this idea of what are you willing to risk in order to to make sure that I'm okay, right? So when I think about allyship, I think about that level of loyalty. Like, are you willing to stand between me and what's coming at me to protect me? Like, are you really willing to do that? And I think that that is something that we all can do in the workplace. So I think about maybe you're in a meeting, right? And someone is getting dogpiled on in the meeting. You should be able to speak up on their behalf and say, hey, let's take a breather. We're kind of all pointing our aggression at this one person. I don't think that's fair. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to risk possibly being looked at differently at work, possibly being reprimanded, the possible consequences of stepping in when you see someone being harmed? So that's kind of how I think it could go both ways, whether you're an ally or someone else is an ally, is being a co-conspirator.
I couldn't agree with you more. That was from allyship. I don't even know if we need allyships at this point, how bad things are. We need co-conspirators and we need sponsors. We need people to say it's time for this person to be promoted. It's time for us to have this person learn these skills and be willing to, like you said, make that sacrifice. And do we have them? We have a lot. I have experience. My supervisor, who is a white woman, with all the trimmings that come with what we think of as a white woman, and this, at the same time says, this is what she's paying me, this is what she needs to pay you, right? It can't get any more real than that, right? From an ally and a sponsor who would be in that room to say, if you're going to do that workshop, or if you're going to do this or that, you can't do that without Jean. That person take that risk. But sometimes it's easier for them to take that risk. We can't always take those risks because sometimes we're the only provider. Financially, we bring, financial security to our family. We can't make that risk. Sometimes they can. So sometimes it's not as difficult for them to be our sponsors or to be co-conspirators with us, but that's exactly what we need. The other note that I made was about increasing their awareness about what we actually experience. And I know sometimes you can say, yes, 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 but you really don't get it. You can't have that empathy until you actually lived it. So help them to increase compassion, nothing else, to listen, really listen and try to understand, take accountability and believe us when we say, this is what it's like for me. And if you're in a position to do something about it, you do that. And maybe, I don't know, we've exhausted trying to train people. It's not our responsibility for that, yet they still hold a majority of the funding and the things that we need to improve ourselves. And so we're just going to keep in some way trying to get them to understand that this is very serious for our lives.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Alana.
I will talk about the difference, going over different types of services, because I have mixed feelings about allyship with people non-women of color personally, and how that works within the community that I work within in the DC area. So I can't really speak on that. But I can speak on, like, when I started my organization, I reached out to different Black women leaders in different fields and try to develop relationships, try to get MOUs with them. But I also met people, community-based organizations or smaller organizations that weren't necessarily 501c3s, who already were embedded in the community, who already were doing things like helping women survivors, having safe sister circles of like support groups, doing other things, and trying to work with them to develop different relationships. So you can have different relationships that aren't just legal, but are just, we believe we provide holistic services. We believe that having given someone like a legal civil protection order is not enough. They also have to give them housing and mental health services and deal with poverty and career counseling. And we try to find other organizations that are either run by women of color or Black women who do those things, because that's what we feel we could trust, that will understand our clients. And when we haven't done that, for instance, we've referred clients to non-women of color therapists, for instance, we've had bad responses, to be honest. And that's, again, my experience. And that's what it is. But I do believe in going through different different service providers or people in the community who do different things and making a relationship with them. So we have like a kind of united Black community of service providers within the area. I think we should all try to do. We're all fighting the same type of thing. We're all oppressed. We all understand the same problems, misogyny, and I think it makes sense for us to work together.
Thank you so much. And so this is not one of our pre-drafted questions, but it came up as you all were talking for me. When we talk about co-conspiratorship, or when we talk about like actual meaningful relationships between folks or between advocates, what then does accountability look like? Does it change? Does it stay the same? Is it more dynamic? What are your thoughts?
I think it's more dynamic, and kind of to play off of what Alana is talking about. Like, I know that like my community are full of Black women and femmes. That's what I know, right? So I'm not around a lot of non-Black people of color, or just non-Black people in general. But I think that when it comes to working alongside white people in particular, like, the level of the accountability has to be more dynamic, because they need to understand that we have more at stake. And I think that it's important to be able to articulate that, and to be able to have those hard conversations, but also be okay with knowing that like there are going to be some folks who are just not co-conspirators that you may have thought would have been, right? And being able to like wash your hands of them and move on. And you may have to end certain partnerships or certain business relationships simply because their values and ideologies do not align with who you are as a person and what you're trying to do. So I think that the co-conspiratorship is an extra level of accountability. Like, you use the word dynamic, like it's an extra, it's kind of like pulling back and taking off the rose-colored glasses and really seeing what this person, are they truly about what they say they are about?
Thank you. Anything from you, Dr. Jean or Alana?
I was just going to add that, yeah, the allyship, it's fraught for me as well. That's why I say I think we're moving into co-conspiratorship, because you can say you're an ally with me when we're in the room, but you don't do the things that prove that you are. So I kind of like, I like the co-conspirator kind of like, okay, there's action behind it. The allies, not always action behind it. Co-conspirator there's action.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so what are some other strategies or insights that we can have to highlight the work being done by Black survivors? And then can anyone talk to us about Black youth and how we're building up Black youth as well?
Our organization is actually trying to start, we can get funded, a survivor advocacy board of Black women, not just in Ward 7 and 8, but that is our focus, but within DC as a whole, to talk about the different legal services and different legal problems they see within the courtroom, and how they could change governance, and how they could change the system in terms of training judges and training different attorneys, and to how to train different people who are involved in the court system, but also changing the law and how the law affects them. End up seeing as a Black woman, you may want to do this as a law, but this impact is hurting me. Even if it is the law that you think it's going to help me, it's not helping me. It's permanent. So we're basically like saying, we see this stuff, but we're not, survivors. We're not our clients. So let's put the survivors' voices first and let them decide what they think is important and what they want to say to, the court system, or to the judges and to the lawmakers that we think they should be able to say. We just take a step back. We're going to fund it and like pay you for your time and let you teach and train people how to like do this type of lobbying and types of leadership training, but we want them to speak honestly and authentically about what they're experiencing. And then say for youth, we have some different programs for youth, like a lot of preventative work. So I really do believe that we have to stop some of the stuff when they're like 11 and 12. You gotta get in there when people are really young for gender-based violence. And we do a lot of workshops about like our body, my rights, with domestic violence, sexual assault, reproductive justice, How do we talk about it with youth? How do they talk about it with us? What can they do? How do they take that to the community of other youth? So I think that we do a lot of preventative work to try to talk to the community before it happens. People are aware that it's happening. I mean, they're aware, they know it's happening because they know what's going on in the community. They're not, people know everything. But just, try to take that into account while you're also helping people who are being harmed, before people are being harmed.
Thank you so much.
I
Dr.
can jump in.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. I can jump in. Just thinking about the question about how do we, some practices to highlight when working with Black survivors and Black youth, and just thinking about approaching things from a cultural perspective. Again, I live in a predominantly white area. So a lot of the things that other people have access to, if you're in Boston or if you're in, Mass Woman of Color is in Boston, but I actually live on the western part of Massachusetts, which is the Berkshires. And so we don't have access to a lot of things that could, a woman comes for service or is in the shelter, she can't get her hair braid, she can't get the food that she likes, if she might be African, Asian or something, and it's like, yeah, maybe you can get some plantains at Stop and Shop, but that's about it. The stuff that brings comfort, because we love comfort food. So the things that bring culture to us, and we see our culture duplicated, we need to make sure that's happening for them. So pretty much some of the things that as we would do as older, for older Black females and older femmes and people who are on the margin needs to happen. Major thing for youth has to make sure they have some sort of a mentor or some sort of a role model, somebody in, typically if we have, especially if we have boys involved, sometimes we come to services, we have just boys or sometimes we have just girls. So those people need that kind of support and just creating opportunities for them so that if you know that someone's religion, then you can say, oh, we have a synagogue or we have a church, we have a mosque or something that makes them feel like, okay, I'm just not alone standing out here. And I think the other question had to do with like youth leaders. Is that what it was?
Yes.
Was it that one? So again, from a cultural perspective and when we work with the youth, they need mentors and we need to help them develop their sense of identity. So whether that's helping them to connect to community, build a sense of themselves, because youth are in that space of development where they're just trying to identify themselves. Who am I in this big wide world and what I need to do? So help them to connect in that way, help them to recognize their national identity. A lot of times they don't recognize that, yeah, I'm a Black youth and I need to be able to survive. I need to be able to do things that's going to optimize my potential in this world. So we need to have them connected, have them do team building sort of things, have them have an international sense of themselves as well, because it's a big world and they may have opportunities through school to do a junior year abroad or in some way. I mentor girls of color and we take them to Africa every 2 years. So they get to, understand who they are and their high school students. So yeah, some of those things, very important.
That's really exciting. I would love to be in that program. Kay, did you have anything?
Yeah, just something quick. Just, making sure that we are putting youth in positions of power, so they know what it feels like to be leaders. So one thing that I want to shout out GGE. I know Monet works there, but I went to a virtual event of theirs where the youth were the speakers and they were talking about a reproductive justice document that they created. And it was youth centered and youth led. And I think that was just really admirable to me, because a lot of times youth are not given the option to speak about different things that are happening in the world and how it impacts them. So I think it's really important to allow them to be in places where they can speak truth to power, where they can be in leadership, where they can write, and their writing is used as a guide for or blueprint for what needs to be done next. Because like, these are little organizers and activists, right? They have thoughts and feelings around what's happening in their communities, and they have ideas about how these things can be changed. And we need to be fostering a sense of empowerment and a sense of self-efficacy that they can actually pull through and do the things that they say they want to do.
Thank you so much. That was a word. Can we talk about some tangible action steps that folks can engage in to foster change, and then any resources you could highlight for folks as they're on this pathway?
Tangible. I have one thing that I could talk about. I could talk about Mass Women of Color Network putting together a toolkit, which we're calling Keeping Black Survivors Alive. And it will be a toolkit that will be used locally, nationally, and internationally, eventually, to help agencies understand how we need to approach the work with Black survivors from a trauma-informed perspective. We need to be able to be intentional. These agencies who said, this is what we want to do, be intentional about that work. So it highlights the many harms that has been done to people of color and the injustices, and also the experiences that they've had from slavery until now, to just bring that understanding of the intergenerational trauma and a lot of things that we blame people for, that if you can stop and look and see what's the foundation of this, you might be able to practice trauma-informed care more carefully. So it centers voice of women of color, Black women and femmes. We're doing some interviewing and putting some stuff together to make that available in June 24. So I'm excited about that because, you know, Black women and femmes are dying on a daily basis, and discrimination, the source that we need to bring compassion to, because we don't quite understand all of it. There's also another big impact on the family around why we need to do Keeping Black Survivors Alive is the law enforcement response. A lot of times when, you know, you'll go to a white agency and they're like, call the police, you know, and you're like, that is not the safest thing for my family. And sometimes even if we are doing that, sometimes you recognize you could lose your entire extended family sometimes. So one has to be strategic about how one gets help. So I'm excited about that and working on that. So thank you.
I can go. So a couple of things in particular that Me Too is doing. We have a healing portal called Survivor Sanctuary that is completely free for survivors. So just you know, directing people to that healing portal that has different types of grounding activities for the mind, body, and integrative. And we're building it out to make it even more interactive over the next year, which is a really great tool for survivors and advocates as well, and people who work in this industry. If they need those resources, they're open to use them as well. Another thing is to make sure you just stay up to date with our social media, because we do something called survivor leadership training, where we train folks to be able to go out into the community and be survivor justice leaders for organizations in their cities and towns. So that's something that we do every year. And those are just some of the things that we kind of have coming down the pike. So just making sure that you all are following us and staying up to date what we have going on. We have a lot of exciting things that I can't speak about just yet, but we have a lot of exciting things that are going to allow folks to really engage with the organization and just engage in that survivor justice work.
I would say tangible things is to learn more about survivors' experiences and learn more about the work in general, gender-based violence. And I think also there is a tendency sometimes that is taboo within the Black community to talk about gender-based violence and talk about women, because the idea that women being abused, there's nothing wrong with it, or women being like Black women being hurt, there's nothing wrong with it. And I think, it takes someone like a man or a non, cisgender Black woman or a femme Black woman to say like, hey, this is wrong. You need someone outside of that community besides yourself to say this is wrong. How can we help this situation? How can we, teach young men or other people like this is not the way you should be acting? I think that's tangible, but also if you are someone who's kind of academic and nerdy like myself, their Black Women Roundtable comes out with a report every year about different intimate partner violence. And I think it's very interesting because they have different cases that happen during the year. They give you up-to-date things about the law, which is important, about VAWA, about OVC, Office of Victims of Crime, and different things like that, which is, I think, important to know if you're getting grants or if you're trying to do like legislative change and things like that. But for us, we're direct services, so we remotely do direct services. So I would say volunteer more like the items, because it's like if you're not like you provide legal services. So if you're not a lawyer, you can't really volunteer. And then we're starting to provide mental health services. So if you're not a counselor, can't really do that. But we do appreciate people just getting involved in our community events like dinners or providing food, like clothes for survivors or other types of things. So that's what I would say.
Thank you.
And
so
find
much.
out different organizations in your community that are involved
Yes.
in gender-based violence. Like there's something in your community, if it's small or big, there probably is something in your community that does this work. Find out who they are and how to work with them.
Absolutely. That I always laugh a little when I talk to programs that say, well, there are no orgs doing this work, or there are no, there's just not that community out here. And I'm like, well, I just saw, 3 Ethiopian folks walk down the street. Like, there is a community of some sort here. So how are you engaging with them, right? Of like, you have to expand what it means to be in community with people. And sometimes that means going into spaces that you have not been before, or it means engaging elders in the community who you've not historically engaged. So again, think about what it means to have access. Think about what it means to collaborate. Think about what it means to, again, foster relationships. All of those things are really important. And then the only other thing that I was sort of thinking through as you all were speaking of like, go read a book. Like, there are a lot of great books out here written by Black women, written by Black femmes, Black feminists that talk about our experiences. And so if you don't have the space yet, like, start with reading. Like, I'm a nerd, so I identify with that, Alana. But like, that's a great place to start, of like reading our stories. Again, we're very oral people, but we have plenty of writers and poets and theorists that have been talking about experiences for years and years and years that folks have not engaged in. So that's always a great starting point as well. And so, folks, we're coming down to our time, but I wanted to open it to folks who might have questions. If you want to drop them in the chat, or if you have comments that you would like shared, you can drop them in the chat as well, or direct message them to me and I can read them out. And yes, or just feel free to add it to the chat in general and we can have those read out. And in the meantime, well, let me give folks a second or so. Go ahead, Dr. Jean.
I just wanted to address, what we're looking forward to and the hopes for the future of the work and what we can get done. As you said earlier, you can read a book, you can do so many things to inform yourself about what we've been through. But I just feel like there are many agencies that are doing the work. And I think we also need to be more connected, because I've learned so much more about, your area of work because I got connected with this organization. Other than that, I don't think I would have known. So that we do need to be connected more, and so that we can reach a broader audience. And I feel like I'm hopeful that the more we put the information out, people will feel free to reveal and get help for some of the issues that they've struggled with and take the stigma out of it. There's a lot of stigma attached to domestic violence, and people often don't reveal their histories with it, because sometimes they don't really understand. If you think about what domestic violence look like, what does sexual assault look like. And so I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Dr. Jean was on it. She was like, do not forget that question, Ayana. But the last question for our panelists is, what are your hopes for the future of the work? What are you looking for? And thank you, Dr. Jean, for starting us out.
I'm looking forward to more storytelling. I think that it's important that we create spaces for folks to be able to share their story safely. And I'm also interested in how we can focus more on healing and action. Those are two big things that are like our main focal points at Me Too. And since I've been working there and just been in this space, and I'm also an abortion doula like Monet, so I work in the reproductive justice space, the idea of healing and action are just so important. So what are the ways in which we can heal, and what are the ways in which we can do call to actions that will benefit folks? So I think that my hope for the future of the work is that there's more healing, there's more action, and there's more storytelling.
Thank you. And Alana, I'll give you the last word.
I think the future, I agree. I think the future, I would say the justice, like those are different forms of justice. It's not just, putting someone in jail, because I don't think that works for a lot of Black women for obvious reasons. People killed in jail, people, all types of things. So I'm really interested in how restorative justice and transformative justice is going to come into the future. Something the organization is looking into, honestly, because I feel like it does more with harm in the community and how to, be held accountable for harm. And it also takes you away from working with the the police department, which our clients generally have bad experiences with. So just like asking survivors, what is your form of justice? What do you see as like something that help you heal? What do you see as something that's like make you whole again, rather than to just like, call the police, put someone in jail? Not to say there's anything necessarily against that, because maybe some people do want that. That's, we can support them doing that as well. But just I'm interested to see different types of like responses to people's acts of harm.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you all. This has been such a rich conversation. Again, if you have any comments, questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll give you a second or two to do that. But I just knew this was going to be an amazing panel, even just talking to you all. You offered a lot of great resources, a lot of tangible action steps. We were very thoughtful in this conversation. There was no hiding in this conversation, which I think we needed, right? And so I don't see anything coming through at the time. But again, if you need to let it marinate and think through your questions some more, feel free to do that. And we can probably share them to our panelists later. I'm speaking for NRCDV. I just made that up. If you all disagree, let me know, Levon. But again, thank you all so much. This was an amazing time. It was such a full conversation. I'm going to pass it back over to Levon.
Woo, wow. Thank you, panelists. Alana, Kay, and Jean, thank you both, all three of you. And Ayana, you did a great job. It's telling me to unmute myself, but I don't understand. But anyway.
We can hear you.
Thank you. There was so many takeaways. And yes, just so thankful to each of you for what you all brought into the space and how it flowed. Just real quick, because I know we are early, actually. I've never seen this in a long time in these spaces, because, we could talk on so many issues, but the fact that we are a little early, I just wanted to take a moment just to throw back out some words or some meanings that you all shared that I jotted down and listening to you. And you all are getting so many thank yous in the chat. So please be sure to, go visit the chat to see what others are saying about you. But I think this was Kay, and I'm not going to remember everybody who said what, bringing in the racial acceptance. I thought that was so powerful. And when Alana talked about trust and believe us, and Dr. Jean being intentional, and Kay, just so you know, I am a storyteller, and that's how I've been able to financially prioritize that and make a living out of that, actually, through the writing of my books. And so storytelling is something that's been handed down to me in my family. They didn't know they were handing it down. We didn't know it was a skill. But I discovered it as a skill in this space. and getting paid for sharing my life experiences, and all of that good stuff. And so just to say to you in support, yes, storytelling is a skill, and we do need to find alternative spaces to make those type of skills more dominant in these spaces, because they are powerful and unique in the way in which Black women and Black communities and Black families share who we are. So I just wanted to share that real quickly as we move through our day, and got good news before, as I give you all the last bit of information. We are going to be able to have a little longer break, and so I'll tell you about that in a sec. But before we leave this space, I do want to add and just take a quick moment of saying we want to highlight the National Resource Center Domestic Violence Transforming the Gender-Based Violence Movement project, which seeks to increase BIPOC representation and accountability in our work. This project has developed concrete recommendations for addressing racial disparities in leadership in the gender-based violence movement. So we wanted you all to know that that link will be dropped into the chat for you to go take a look at that and become more informed of what's happening with the Transforming the Gender-Based Violence Movement project. And we are really proud of that. I'm also proud because I was a part of helping create that work. And so, yes, please go take a look at what that looks like and what that means, and how, if anything, you can get involved and participate in different ways that will be necessary. So with that, as we transition into our break, I want to remind everyone, please, that you can access the Wellness Room at any time by clicking on the breakout room button and selecting Wellness Room. A Care Bear is there for your support, if need be. So just, again, take care of yourself as you need to digest information, or just take a break from the information. But we here in NRC are here for you in whichever ways we can assist. So we'd like to thank you for staying with us, right? And staying engaged. And please use the chat as your engagement to us. And the last thing I want to say about the chat before we go into our break is, when you come back, please use the chat to share who you are, where you're from, what you do at your organization, what the name of your organization is. So let us know who's here, and let your colleagues know who's here. So if you need to connect and do some networking with each other through the chat, that's absolutely a great option to use for your availability. And so I'm not exactly sure how long the break is, but I'm going to take the initiative. Let me look at my clock. I'm going to take the initiative to say, how about 10 minutes? Because I'm just adding an extra 5.
Levon,
Yes, Kate.
before you move us into break, let's pass the floor back to our town hall weaver.
Yes, let's do that. Monet, who is awesome. And so Monet will take us and move us into the next break session. And so thank you, Monet, and thank you, Casey.
Of course. Just want to reiterate that there's a Padlet link in the chat. Using that link, you can share whatever you're taking away from the first session. You can also view the illustration that's being captured, and just understand that the illustration is not done at this time. So we invite you to add your concrete action steps to this Padlet as well, so others can see what you are committed to doing moving forward. I just want to thank the previous panelists again for such an amazing session. I feel like I learned so much. And also thank you for uplifting GGE's youth, right? Pony will be with us tomorrow to talk a little bit about her contribution to the Repo Justice Movement and the pamphlet that she helped write. And I'm happy to drop that in the chat as well. So far, we've learned what it means to support Black survivors, and so much of what you all named definitely has carried me along the way in my life. So I'm excited for that. After our break, we're going to move into what it means to have meaningful partnerships with Black-led movements and organizations. I think speaking back to Kay, someone who I love so dearly, and thinking about the partnerships between Girls for Gender Equity and Me Too, or Movement for Black Lives, and Black Feminist Future, and all these other wonderful organizations, including the ones that are all with us today. I really love the question of like, what does it mean for us to work together and partner together? And like, what does it mean for people not in our movement to partner with us, all in support of survivorship? And so I'm so excited to talk about that soon.